during the past 12 years, the per pupil funding in British Columbia has actually fallen almost $1,000 per child below the national average. That long-term systemic underfunding of public education has had some really serious side effects. Here in Langley, I was forced to sit in a room and try to negotiate whose jobs would be lost. Of course, as president of the Teachers Union, I chose not to participate in making that decision, but it was made for me. And the decision was that our counselors in Langley at the elementary level would be cut in half. So that led to situations where schools were now having one counselor share between 3, 4, 5 schools, as opposed to the previous situation where they may have had a counselor all unto themselves or one shared between 2 schools. One of the worst icings on the cake scenarios I've ever had to deal with was that in the same meeting, at the same time as we were told our counselors were being reduced by half at the elementary level, they also took away our district advisor for counselors that dealt with all the suicide ideation requests district-wide. The one person who handled all of the very serious situations where trained counselors had determined that these children may commit suicide. That position was also cut. So my question to you is, if your party wins, when will you start restoring the funding to specialist positions that have been cut across this province so that our most vulnerable students will once again begin to receive the support that they so badly desire and deserve? Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to have Wally open on the last question here.
You know, there's no doubt that what has been happening with the various cuts that have been carried out over the past few years are having had an extremely negative effect. It's having a negative effect on the staff, and it's having a negative effect on the children, and that has to be corrected. Thank you.
Before I answer the question, I just want to address something Mary said in her last answer, was that this is the first government to actually put legislation in place for classroom sizes. What she didn't mention is that they broke that legislation 16,000 times. And this isn't unlike a government that has a balanced budget law and passes an exemption for it to run a deficit. What we need is a government that respects legislation more than just when they're legislating people back to work. Now, the answer to that question is right away. We start restoring the funding to that right away. We have a very detailed education funding plan in our platform, and we need to start making up the gains of everything we lost in the past 10 years immediately.
None of these issues are simple, and I'm not going to try and answer one that has reference to a specific detailed incident or decision that I don't have the detail on. I can say this, though, that anyone who thinks that governments don't go into this with the best of intentions would be wrong. But it's can they carry it out? You talk about legislation. There's a very simple piece of legislation that the NDP in their entire 10 years of government couldn't manage to follow. And that is that in the entire 10 years, they didn't once give school districts their funding announcement on time. Not once. And they didn't give school districts additional time to make their budget. It was a very volatile situation in which to run a school district. We provided 3-year funding envelopes, increasing funding, per pupil funding at its highest amount in the history of British Columbia. And we're starting to see better and better results in terms of Aboriginal graduation rates, overall graduation rates, and our international scores for grade 4 students in terms of reading. It is always going to be challenging to fund public education.
Thank you, Mary. And Lisa.
It really comes down to an issue of priority. Where do we want our money to be spent? And education is a priority for the Green Party. We understand that unless we have quality education, that our children are going to suffer. And then there's going to be consequences for everybody, because children suffering from the lack of quality education is going to affect everybody. And again, it's going to be costly solutions later. So we need to put the money into education now. We need to fix the problems that happen, and we need to get our quality education back up and running.
Thank you for the question, and I'm really sorry that you were faced with that Sophie's choice, because that's an untenable position to be put into. Who do I cut? Who do I put out of work? Part of our platform does address this situation, Now, I'll just go back, our platform fully costed, so we know where the money's going to come from. But I just want to say, we're going to put at least $100 million into classroom supports. We're going to hire new teachers, new support staff, librarians, counselors. And when, you ask, will that happen? After the new government comes in, hopefully, we'll be streaming that money into the system as quick as we can, finalized in a fall budget. We will bring in a new budget, and the budget that we bring in will be addressing issues like this, because this is quite honestly an untenable situation that you've been put in. And again, you're not the only district. It's province.
Thank you, Shayne. And Rick.
There's a lot of teacher questions here tonight, eh? We've seen over 200 schools closed under the Liberals, resulting in overcrowding classrooms, long bus ride, less one-on-one time for the students. When we repeal the carbon tax, you'll see much needed funds for school budgets immediately. Our mandate is to make sure public schools are funded properly to help reduce that 30% cut last year. We have the worst in Canada teacher-pupil ratio, which is something we should be proud of. There's no excuse for, as we've all said here tonight, education is an investment in the future, and we need to fund it properly.
As a businessman, the first question I'm always asked is, well, can you afford it? Is there a return on investment? How are you going to pay for it? Where's the money coming from? I refer to an April 25th article in the Vancouver Sun written by the president-elect of the BCTF, and he identified how much they need. Anybody want to guess what that number is? $3.1 billion. That's what it's going to take to restore funding to the 2001 level. Now, frankly, I don't know about you, I don't have $3.1 billion, but I know where it is. The budget in this province is $46+ billion. If we can't carve out at least a percentage of that $3.1 billion for our kids, then I fear the future. Because we're going to have to find that money somewhere. It's coming from us, folks. It's all coming out of our pockets. So we decide the priority, not somebody else. We decide what's going to happen because we're responsible for our children's future, not the government. Thank you.
Thank you very much.